Amiga, do you ever feel caught between two worlds? You cherish your cultural background, but sometimes it clashes with the realities of raising a family in modern America. You might feel pressured to fulfill traditional expectations, yet you crave a life that allows you to be your true, authentic self. If you're a Latina mom nodding your head right now, I see you, and I get it. Balanced Motherhood is more than your average mommy coaching program. It's a supportive comunidad designed specifically for you. I understand the unique challenges you face navigating between generations and culturas while forging your own path as a mama. Stop feeling like you have to choose between your roots and your future. Balanced Motherhood empowers you to create a life that celebrates your heritage, embraces your motherhood journey, and prioritizes your own happiness. Spots are limited. Don't miss out on this opportunity to connect with a supportive community and create a more balanced life. Visit the link in the show notes to join the waitlist for the next Balanced Motherhood cohort. I can't wait to meet you. Hola, hola, amiga. In today's Viva la Mami Spotlight episode, we welcome Anna Calix, who is a biracial, single, bereaved, and accomplished Latina mom who has dedicated her career to helping other disadvantaged mamas and babies thrive. Her profession became her passion when her first child, Liam, was stillborn on his due date in 2016. She is committed to supporting fellow bereaved parents in their journeys while working toward reducing pregnancy and infant loss through support and education so that fewer families have to live the same experience. Anna achieves this work through the non-for-profit she founded, which is called Gifts from Liam. Gifts from Liam's diaper assistance programs are a cornerstone of the organization's work. Diaper need is a growing issue in the U.S., with half of all babies lacking sufficient diapers to stay clean, dry, and healthy. Since 2017, Gifts from Liam has worked to close the diaper gap to save babies. The diaper programs rely entirely on donations. Therefore, this year, between September 17th and September 30th, 2023, Gifts from Liam is hosting their annual diaper drive where you can donate on site if you live in the Chicagoland area. And if you're not, well, no worries, because you can donate through their Amazon wish list or give a monetary donation through their website. If you listen to this episode after September 30th, you can still donate to giftsfromliam.org, where you can either donate a monetary donation or, again, you can go to their Amazon wish list. Links on how to participate and or donate are provided in the show notes. Not only will your donations help to alleviate the diaper need, but they also enable families to receive life-saving information, as each diaper bundle is packaged with educational information about safe pregnancy and infant care practices to help babies thrive. I had a wonderful conversation with Anna, and I left with so much appreciation about her and her story and her organization that she created in memory of her son. Know that in our conversation, we mentioned about trigger warnings, and that was eye-opening. I don't want to disclose a trigger warning here because I believe that her story is valid, is true. She experienced it all, and she deserves the space and attention needed, just like all other stories. And even if we're going to feel uncomfortable, just as uncomfortable as other things that we don't want to listen to, it is worth listening, giving attention, so that way we can not only build awareness, but take action towards things that matter, such as pregnancy and infant loss. So on this Viva la Mami Spotlight episode, here is my conversation with Anna Calix from Gifts from Liam. Welcome to the Viva la Mami podcast. I am your host, Jessica Cuevas. I am a mother of two on a mission to help redefine the meaning of motherhood as a modern Latina mom. Motherhood can be a complex journey, interwoven in two identities that often make us feel ni de aquí ni de allá. Viva la Mami is committed to providing you with knowledge, tools, and support to navigate the challenges and triumphs of motherhood as Latina moms. On the show, we'll be discussing culturally relevant topics that will help inform and empower you in whichever season you are in on your motherhood journey. We'll be joined by Latina moms, experts and professionals who can offer advice, practical tips, relatable stories, and honest conversations. So bring your cafecito as I invite you to be a part of this space as we create comunidad about the exciting and challenging parts of being a mommy. Ahora, vámonos. Hola, hola, Ana. How are you?
Muy bien, gracias. How are you?
I am good. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. I happened to find you, I think through Chicago Latina Moms, like a long time ago. It was through a diaper drive that I've heard of your organization. And I remember donating through Amazon. And then most recently, you had a diaper drive collection at Luna y Cielo Play. And that's when I met you. So it was awesome to just connect with you. And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate everything that you're doing for the community in honor of your son, which we will definitely talk about your story. But if you can just introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, of course. And that's amazing to hear that you've been following our story and our journey and donated to the diaper drives in the past. So thank you for that. And I'm really grateful to be here with you. Thank you again for the opportunity. I was born and raised in Honduras, and then I came to the United States for college, and then I've stayed here ever since. I was studying pre-med and biology and communications in college. I wanted to be a doctor initially with the goal of sort of changing the healthcare system, but I learned about public health while in college, and so kind of pivoted, and now I've just recently completed my master's in public health. So I've been working in the field of public health, healthcare, my entire career. I had my first son, Liam, in 2016, and that his birth and stillbirth was the root of where Gifts from Liam started.
Yeah, thank you. And for our listeners that aren't familiar with your organization and the root of how your organization was created, would you be willing to share about your first pregnancy and experience as a bereaved mom?
Yes. So when I became pregnant with Liam, it was an unplanned pregnancy, but it was a welcomed pregnancy. I was excited to become a mom, and I started going into mom mode immediately and planning. And I happened to be working in perinatal care at the time when I became pregnant. So I had a lot of knowledge about pregnancy, birth, everything. And then my colleagues were OB nurses and doctors and specialists. And so all along I had sort of guidance and answers at my fingertips. And I was a perfect patient. I did all the right things. I avoided all the things you're supposed to avoid. You know, up until that point, I'd provided a lot of guidance to pregnant family members and friends because of all of the knowledge that I was acquiring. And then also that was when I was starting my master's in public health too. So both academically, professionally, and then, you know, just the social capital that I had, friends and family, you know, really perfectly positioned me to have a great pregnancy, great outcome. And then tragically, just a couple of days before his due date, he wasn't moving as he usually would. And while I knew a lot about pregnancy, I'd never been pregnant, so I didn't know what it was supposed to feel like. And at that time, my providers, I was with a midwifery group, they didn't talk to me too much about monitoring my baby's movements. They would just ask me, do you feel him move? And I'd be, yeah, he's very active. I feel him move a lot. But they didn't really get into it too much. They didn't provide much education around the importance of monitoring movement and what to do if and when it changes. But I think instinctively, if someone, whether it's a baby in utero or us, right, if our behavior suddenly changes, someone's going to notice and think something's up. And so that's why I called and I said, he's not moving like he usually does. I haven't felt a good kick yet. And they were very dismissive of my concerns. They kind of brushed it off and told me, you know, not to worry about it, that it was probably just because he was running out of room. I was almost at my due date. and to just take it easy. And if anything changed, to let them know. So I did. I took it easy the rest of the day, and I was closely paying attention to his movements and stuff. And I still felt movement. And then nothing changed. So I didn't call until the next morning when I still hadn't felt a good kick. I called again. I said, hey, still a little concerned. And they, again, very nonchalantly, okay, well, come on in. We'll check you out just to see how things are. And I said, okay, well, I had moved about halfway through my pregnancy from the city to the south suburbs to be closer to family that I have here. And I told them, I was like, well, it's going to take me like over an hour to get there, probably an hour and a half, because the morning was rush hour traffic. I had to go all the way to the north side of the city. And they said, no worries, we'll be here. So we got in the car, made our way over there. And I'm not a very prayerful person unless like I really, really mean it. But at that point in time, I was like, well, I don't know what else to do other than pray to God and ask him to make my baby move and make him be okay. And so I'm clutching my belly, just asking for movement, for a kick. And I don't get that. And so I get to the hospital, check in, and they're just taking their time getting me in. Like there's no concern at all. And finally, they get me into the room and they start looking for his heartbeat, which was always so quick and easy to find that I knew pretty immediately that something was wrong. And 5-6 people later, they told me that he no longer had a heartbeat, that he had died. And so they gave me the option to stay in the hospital and be admitted for an induction, or to go home and wait for my body to go into labor naturally. And of course, neither of which were good options. But for me, I couldn't imagine going home knowing that my baby was dead inside me and playing the waiting game. So I stayed and I was induced. And a couple days later, he was born on his due date. And he was perfect inside and out after getting tests and everything done. We learned that there were some possible contributing factors to his death, but really nothing definitive. And ultimately, the only answer, if I can even call it that I was given for his death was that these things just happen. And so because of the work that I was doing, that answer was unacceptable to me, both like personally, professionally, and it just brought me back to the work that I was doing in so many fetal death cases that I had personally reviewed and seeing the data. That was one of my primary responsibilities was data analysis in my role. And I would attend the morbidity and mortality reviews, and I'd hear how these cases were discussed. And it's very insensitive. And it's like they forget that that's someone's baby they're talking about. And even before having my own experience, I felt that these cases were treated like somebody losing a gallbladder or an appendix or something. Like it just wasn't important. It didn't matter to them. And they'd fill out the paperwork and okay, move on to the next one. And as a public health person, it always frustrated me that we weren't really doing much to work towards prevention. And we were seeing the same cases happening over and over again. And the statistics have changed very minimally over the last decade or decades. When Liam was stillborn, the data was that 23,000 babies a year were stillborn in the United States. And now it's nearly 7 years later, it's 21,000 babies. So a slight decrease, but at least half the cases occurring are preventable. And so those deaths shouldn't be happening. So then what I always say is that my profession became my passion, and I really started working towards addressing the lack of awareness around stillbirth and infant mortality and the lack of prevention efforts and addressing that in whatever small way I could. And so that evolved into what became my motherhood journey with Liam as a bereaved mom, was to help other babies in his memory.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing your story, because this is never an easy topic, especially for other moms who are lost moms, that it can be triggering. So I will make sure to mention a trigger warning before our interview. But I think it is important to talk about this, and it's all about awareness and in creating community with other moms that have gone through a similar situation to talk about their experiences, because like you said, it's all about prevention, and it's all about how can we prevent another infant mortality rate from what statistics show us. And it is very unfortunate that despite of us living in a developed country, in a very rich country, and in this era, we are still having issues. And so how can one be a little bit more aware or educated about how they can prevent stillbirth, especially to women of color? Is there something that you can share?
Yes. And so interestingly, you mentioned trigger warnings, right? And so I never trigger warning my story. That's my baby. That's my birth experience. And to label it with a trigger warning pushes people away. And so the first step to any change is awareness. And if you're trigger warning things that need to be heard, that need to be seen, that need to be witnessed, and also validating people's experiences who have lost babies either in pregnancy or in infancy or in childhood, to put a trigger warning on that is to push their child away. So I, again, don't personally trigger warning my own story and or any other people's stories. Those are our children. And there are so many things happening in this world that are triggers for a lot of people, and we can't censor everything, right? And some things, rather than putting trigger warnings out there, it should be, look at this, read this, learn about this. This is important. We need to minimize the taboo and talk more about this. And so again, that's the first step to addressing this is talking about it more, normalizing it, because sadly, it is normal for babies to die. It happens every day to thousands of people in the United States, in the world. And when it comes to people of color, as you mentioned, there's a heightened sense of taboo and stigma around talking about baby loss. And culturally, what I've seen is that whether it's Latino culture, whether it's Black culture, whether it's Asian culture, the family structures, the societal structures are reinforcing the silence around it. And then that leaves the people that it's happening to feeling very lonely and isolated and unseen and unheard, and like their babies don't matter. And if we're not talking about it, we're never going to change it. Then there are, beyond raising awareness, like raising awareness is only the first step, but then there are concrete actions that we can take as pregnant and parenting individuals, as well as systemic levels, community levels, you name it, there's some type of action that we can be taking in order to help reduce these preventable deaths. And so on that personal level, as a pregnant person, for example, there are concrete practices that have been demonstrated to help save babies. For example, kick counting. And there are apps out there to do that. Sleeping on your side, some very basic practices that a lot of people don't hear about, don't learn about until it's too late, because we're not talking about it and we're not giving people or receiving that education in our pregnancies. And, doctors, it's my belief that it's not necessarily the doctor's role specifically to address that, because they don't, the way the healthcare system, especially in the United States, is structured, it doesn't allow them that time to really sit and educate their patients, oftentimes in the way that they need them, especially when it comes to vulnerable populations. And so there are other resources and avenues that we can add on to a person's pregnant and parenting experience to help ensure that they are getting that education and those resources. So for example, one of the things we do with Gifts from Liam is include that educational information in the diaper bundles that we're providing to families. And so in the tiny diapers, newborn and size 1, we also include that pregnancy information, because oftentimes the people receiving those diaper bundles are preparing for their baby's arrival. And perhaps they haven't received this education yet, or if they have, it's reinforcing that learning. But that's one small way of kind of getting that education into the hands of people who need it. And then, there are other systems, like I mentioned, like I encourage every pregnant person to be enrolled in a home visiting program, where they will also be getting that support, education, resources that they need to help ensure a successful outcome. And then ideally, there are very clear disparities that I've looked at maps of poverty and infant deaths. And the same areas where there are high levels of poverty, that is where you see high rates of infant mortality. The same areas where you see high poverty, it's where you see high diaper need, because diaper need is poverty. It means you can't afford enough diapers for your baby. And, that's half of US families, as you and I were discussing at the beginning, who can't afford enough diapers for their babies.
Yeah, it's just interesting how oftentimes we see that correlation, where statistics tell us certain populations will be the most impacted. And I think it's a great way that you have started this organization, because you are amplifying that level of resources that oftentimes people in the community don't even know or don't even get it from, practitioners like you mentioned. And I do see it, like, for myself, like with my experience, I do come from a place of privilege because of my education level, because of having the resources to ask questions, to not be afraid to ask questions, that it was a very smooth pregnancy, 2 pregnancies that I had and births. But even so, like how with your story, right? You even worked in the profession, you knew the profession. Like, how did you navigate that, where even though you were equipped with the resources, how did you navigate after your loss? And in adding the layer of our cultura as Latinas too, like, how did you really navigate your loss with Liam?
So a couple of things there. I'll start with the end of navigating loss. And in my job, I looked at data and reviewed cases and taught, helped facilitate educational seminars, for example, for providers. We never addressed the actual loss experience for a person who enters into that world. So I didn't have any knowledge about how to navigate that. I at least knew about stillbirth, knew about all the types of losses and all the causes of death. I had that awareness. And so therefore, as you said, right, I had the education. I knew what questions to ask. I knew what practices to follow to an extent. But, and people look at these deaths, and especially on that systemic level and provider level, and they want to blame the birther, blame the pregnant person. That's kind of the default, is to say, well, they didn't do this, they didn't do that, they should have called sooner, they should have come sooner, they shouldn't have been smoking before their pregnancy. And some of these factors, smoking, for example, like they do elevate your risk. But what are we doing to help them lessen their risk factors? That's where it kind of stops. Like there's not a lot of prevention being done. So in my case, it was like, well, how can they point the finger at me? I did do all the things. I did know all the things. I did ask all the questions. I had all the support. I had all the resources. And people would say, well, how could this happen to you? And I'm like, well, it just goes to show you that really, and the data shows it too, there's not really anything that protects you from stillbirth, especially. People of all racial, ethnic, educational, income levels are being impacted by stillbirth. Now, and then we see it more in at-risk communities. And that does speak to the disparities and the lack of access to quality prenatal care, to childbirth education classes, to support resources that are helping to lessen those risk factors. And so Now, going back again to the loss experience, when they told me, okay, he died, you have to give birth now, I was like, well, now I don't know what to do. Like, I know the steps to follow, but like, how does that change when your baby dies?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you grieve? How do you mother a baby who's not here? I didn't have any guidance for that. I at least, again, knew that it existed. So many people have a stillbirth, and the first thing they say is, I'd never heard of that. Everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, but it's very common knowledge that, after 12 weeks is kind of the safe point, once you enter the second trimester. And so that's when people feel comfortable announcing, because after that, nothing bad can happen.
Right.
And then it happens to you, you say, wait a minute, I was 20 weeks, I was 30 weeks, I was 40 weeks, I was 42 weeks. My baby was born alive and died minutes later, hours later, weeks later. I didn't know these things could happen. How can a perfectly healthy baby die all of a sudden?
Right.
And we're not teaching that. Like, no matter what your level of education and income and et cetera, all the social determinants of health, it's not being taught. It's not being talked about. And so I feel like I had an advantage in at least having kind of like the basic knowledge entering into this experience. And I knew of tools and resources and support sources, but I had never thought I'd need to access them. So one thing, for example, as soon as he was born, I knew I wanted to donate my breast milk, which remains not a commonly known thing, that you can donate your breast milk after having a loss. And it's the kind of default way to address lactation after loss is suppress. And I think that it's improving for sure. But even only 7 years ago, when Liam was born, it was kind of, the lactation consultant at the hospital even came into my room and said, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to help you. I've never had someone want to do this before. And my response to the lactation consultant was basically, do your job and show me how to use a breast pump. Like, that's all you need to worry about. Like, I had learned through my job that this was an option. And I was one of the first donors of the local milk bank for the bereavement milk donation program, because again, it was still a newer thing. And it has changed a lot in 7 years, but still the default response is kind of like, oh, well, suppress your breast milk. And that tone of suppress your breast milk is suppress your loss, suppress your experience, suppress your feelings. Let's just try to sweep it under the rug as quickly as possible and move on. And that sweeping under the rug, that moving on, that getting over it, let's not think about it, let's not talk about it, let's not feel the bad feelings, that is seen much more strongly in any communities of color as well. And in fact, what we're seeing more and more is that we're creating dedicated grieving spaces for people of color, because what we find is that when people of color are in a group that is largely made up of only white people and they're sharing their experiences, they're just not at all the same experience. And we hear that there is a lot more support. A white person comes into space, oh, well, I had all this support and all this help, and I grieved freely and openly, and it was welcomed, and I got to take 7 months off of my job, and I was taken care of. And it's just a completely different experience than what we hear from people of color, like on all levels, like logistically, emotionally, mentally. In communities of color, people are often, again, just kind of pressured into, well, just move on, forget about it, don't talk about it, have another baby, get back to your normal life. And a person who's had a baby still has to recover physically. The postpartum changes are still the same, but not only are they having the same physical postpartum recovery needs, they have heightened mental, social, emotional postpartum needs that more often than not are not being addressed or supported. again, especially in communities of color. And, speaking of the maps, if you were to look at where perinatal bereavement support resources are centered compared to where infant losses are happening, you'll see like complete opposites, right? Like most support resources are over here, but most losses are over here. So the people who are having losses over here have all the support, but not down here, right?
Oof. This is, yeah. And I'm not surprised. I am not surprised at all, because where you often see the resources, it's like, well, there aren't as many people that use them, but for some reason they are very well funded and they're there if in case certain populations are impacted, which it does. I'm not trying to ignore that, but it's just, it's so systemic and it just pisses me off, But what you have created, Anna, like Gifts from Liam, it's at least giving me hope and others hope about just creating awareness. You're taking action by providing resources. And so you have mentioned that through your motherhood journey of Liam, which I love because, again, you're not ignoring the fact that you had a stillbirth and that was that. You still had this motherhood journey through your loss, through honoring your son's memory. And you continued on by creating this organization called Gifts from Liam. And so I've seen your organization grow and blossom, and it is continuing to be strong. But can you tell our listeners a little bit more about it and how it has evolved and what types of resources you offer as well?
Yes, I will try to do that concisely. Because yes, it has definitely evolved, grown, blossomed over the years. And it's been an incredible journey to both be a part of and also witness. What we say became the start of Gifts from Liam was for his first birthday. I wanted to honor that in some way, but I didn't feel comfortable throwing a traditional birthday party for a baby who isn't here. So I kind of started down a Google rabbit hole. Somehow through that, learned about diaper need and the diaper gap, which at the time was that 1 in 3 families couldn't afford enough diapers for their babies. And now that's increased to 1 in 2 families can't afford enough diapers for their babies. And I think, just a side note, I think that's just astounding that it's getting worse. And that means half of families with babies can't provide enough diapers for their babies to keep them dry and clean. That's just astounding to me because, a diaper is about as basic of a need as you can get for a baby.
Right.
And half of the families having babies can't afford enough of them. And then, there aren't programs out there that will pay for the diapers for you. Like you may be getting food stamps, can't buy diapers with that. You may be on WIC. Maybe some WIC centers will help you with a little bit of diapers, but certainly not enough to fully diaper your baby. You may be getting Medicaid. If you're lucky, your Medicaid provider helps with diapers, but again, not enough. So that it always falls on the family to provide those. And for so many reasons, a family can't do that. So anyways, going back to Gifts from Liam and his first birthday and how it all kind of started was that I learned about that. I learned all these things, right? And I learned that families are forced to reuse diapers, even like literally dry them out and reuse them again as if they were a cloth diaper or something. And, the health consequences that babies experience and families experience as a result of leaving diapers on for too long. They develop rashes. Then you have an uncomfortable, fussy baby that adds stress onto the parent because now they're trying to calm and take care of a crying, fussy baby, as if having a happy baby wasn't hard enough. Now you have a baby with rashes and uncomfortable and crying and adding stress onto the parent when they're already stressed because they can't afford to meet their baby's basic needs. So, and then that families they can't go to work if they can't take their baby to daycare, and daycares will literally have to turn families away if they don't have diapers. I think the latest data said that 4 out of 5 families with diaper age children report having to miss days of work because of not having diapers. And so, that cycle of poverty is perpetuated and continues, and there's not enough to support these families. And so learning all of that, broke my heart. And I also was just astounded that I didn't know about that working in that field.
Mm.
And I think that also speaks to the privilege that I had as a new mom. Like the thought of not having enough diapers for my baby never crossed my mind. And it's not because I was wealthy, but it was because of the social networks that I had, that I knew would always be supported and taken care of. I had 3 baby showers. I had everything he needed probably for the first year of life, if not longer. And then there are babies born into this world who don't even have diapers. So I started giving away his stuff like from the beginning, especially things like diapers where there's no emotional attachment to them. But then once I learned all of this, I was like, wow, like I'm going to have a diaper drive. And so that first diaper drive was only me putting it out to family and friends, like, hey, help me celebrate Liam's birthday, donate some diapers. And we ended up getting 20,000 diapers in that very first year.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I was equally as surprised once we counted it all up. Like, wow, that's a lot of diapers. And I didn't have a goal, I didn't have an expectation. And I would have been happy with 1,000. And then we got that many diapers. So to me, that was, I always say Liam guides me in what I do. And to me, that was like Liam telling me, like, you got to do this, do this, keep helping babies. And because of knowing that if a family is struggling with meeting basic needs, they're not doing the things like that you and I did in our pregnancies and our parenting journeys of researching and connecting and, participating in groups, participating in classes. They don't have the capacity, because if you're stressing about basic needs, like that's your focus, right? And I think most people are at some point in their lives in a situation like that where they just have something that's completely consuming their lives, right? And so a lot of other things that are important get put on the back burner. And so reading and researching and going to classes, that gets put on the back burner because you're just focused on that, meeting those basic needs. And that's basic psychology too, right? Like that's Maslow's hierarchy that I think people learn about even in high school. So in that sense, you can understand it, right? Like when you're operating at that very base level, you can't, if these base level needs aren't met, you're not going to be up here in, I don't know, self-fulfillment or something like that at the top, what it is. But so that was kind of the birth of Gifts from Liam, starting with that diaper assistance program, and knowing that being able to help meet those basic needs also provided a vehicle to help families get some of that education that's so vital to the health and safety of their babies. So we started packaging our diapers with the educational information, and knowing that daycares require about 25 diapers for a week, we bundled them in packages of 25. So at least you would have enough diapers for daycare that you can go to work. And we established partnerships with different community organizations, which, that those partnerships have grown over the years as well, for them to be able to distribute these diapers to their clients. Because we also wanted to reduce the barriers of, rather than having a client come to an organization seeking help with X and then saying, I need diapers, okay, go over there. They just have them right there on the spot to help meet that need. And so continue that diaper assistance program. We've added on cloth diapers as well, which I believe are the answer to diaper need, because if you have cloth diapers, you never run out of diapers. And then on the other side of, as the diaper assistance program was growing, my involvement in providing bereavement support was growing, as well as seeing and learning about how deficient bereavement care was, especially for populations of color, especially for Spanish speakers. Spanish speakers in particular, I was getting a lot of referrals for Spanish speakers. And I was getting a lot of requests from organizations and providers for, can you help us out with these Spanish speakers? So all of that naturally, organically has evolved into, our bereavement support programs, which are providing support, facilitating support groups, giving, provider trainings to improve bereavement care, and also, working on prevention initiatives and working on ways to better support families. For example, we are working on Liam's Law, which is going to improve existing legislation so that families who have a stillbirth can receive a birth certificate for their baby.
Wow. Can you explain that a little bit more? What kind of legal certificate do parents receive? Is it just a death certificate?
So it's interesting because, and we'll just talk about Illinois
Okay,
for timing.
sure.
In Illinois, a law was passed in 2003 entitling parents to receive what's called a certificate of stillbirth, which essentially looks like a birth certificate, but it's recognizing that it was a birth, but it was a stillbirth, but it's still validating that birth. And
Mhm.
so they would get a birth certificate called a certificate of stillbirth and a death certificate. However, in 20 years since that law passed, only 75 certificates have been issued. And for reference, there are upwards of 600 stillbirths per year. And it used to be even more, it used to be in the 900s
Mm.
in these 20 years that we're talking about. So within the span of a couple years, 1 year, if there's 600 stillbirths and in 20 years, there's only been 75 certificates issued, that clearly tells us that there was an implementation failure in providing families with this birth certificate. And so that means that every family having a stillbirth was only getting a death certificate. And that adds to that pain, right? That hurt and that reinforcement that your baby doesn't matter, your baby died but didn't live. But for us, and I think anyone who's experienced parenting can understand, like, for some people, from the moment you see that positive pregnancy test, and for other people, that connection or that experience of saying I'm a parent now happens later in pregnancy, but you get to know your baby in your pregnancy. So you're in your mind, in your body, you're a mom early on in that journey. And so then that just disappears after your baby dies, and you're getting messages and reinforcement that your baby didn't really exist, your baby didn't matter, by small but significant issues like that, like only getting a death certificate. And so the Liam's law works to amend that legislation so that there are administrative requirements to ensure that families are receiving this, as well as amending just some of the other more logistical things about it. As we've been working on that project, we're learning across all levels, whether it's parents don't know that existed. And so they're saying, oh, I never heard about that. Wish someone would have told me. I would like one. How do I get one? To doctors, nurses, the bereavement support people at hospitals saying, I didn't know that existed either. And, birth workers not knowing about it either. Community organizations, nobody knows about it. And if nobody knows about it, no one is able to access it. So I'm still trying to figure out how the 75 certificates were issued. How do people know about those? And I found one source that was telling families about it. So perhaps all 75 came from there. We're still digging into that. But clearly from those numbers alone, we know that it wasn't, and from the anecdotal stories of people saying, like, no, I'd never heard of this.
Right.
We know that issue happened where there was some type of support created for bereaved families, but it's not being offered. And so that's another issue, right? Is that the supports that are out there, families aren't being connected to. And oftentimes it's just because people don't know that those supports exist. Like if people have if a person who speaks Spanish has a stillborn baby at their hospital, but they don't know about the support groups that I facilitate for Spanish speakers, they can't connect them.
Yeah.
It's also important to help raise awareness to the supports that are out there in addition to improving them.
Yes. Yes. And especially within the Latinx community, like there aren't conversations or the fact of like just this level of normalization that things can happen, right? I don't know of any other organization that offers like bereavement support for, the Spanish speaking community. And so are there any other resources, either through gifts from Liam or from like other organizations that you know of that, people can seek, whether if it's nationally or even within the state of Illinois? Are there any resources that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll highlight a few that I work with. So nationally, Return to Zero Hope offers support for bereaved families, and they are being very intentional about providing space for people of color and for Spanish speakers. We're actually starting our first Spanish speaking support group this fall. And then the Star Legacy Foundation is another national nonprofit that provides bereavement support options for family, from support groups to peer companions. And then they also are working on stillbirth and neonatal loss prevention. Then locally, there is FEMUR, where families can be, it stands for the Fetal Infant Mortality Review. So families can be referred to FEMUR who have experienced a stillbirth or infant loss and basically share their story with the goal of learning what factors outside of those that are in their medical records contributed to their loss. Because if we better understand those factors, then we can work towards fixing those problems. And through that experience of sharing their story, they will also be connected to resources locally and nationally. And then Missing Pieces is another local organization that will help connect people with support resources and help them navigate accessing other resources based on their needs for child loss at any stage, including pregnancy, infancy, and beyond.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. And to be frank with you, I've never heard of these organizations. And I think it's more so about amplifying this and just, again, normalizing this, that if in case you know someone that is going through loss, regardless if it's through pregnancy or stillbirth or later on in life, like, I think it is important to be aware of all of these resources to share, or even if it impacts you as well. And it's all about normalizing it because, again, things can happen, which it can make such a significant impact in your life. Like, we don't even want to imagine. But again, statistics show us that it can. And what are we going to do about it, right? And as harsh as it sounds, I think that we just all need to be realistic about, those outcomes and how you can move forward with it. And so how has your loss of Liam shaped who you are today?
Well, I'd say that I'm a completely different person from before Liam and after Liam. Like, there's who I was before and who I am now. And it's continually evolving. And I think what you were speaking to, right, like normalizing it, and part of why I'm so open and vocal and public about my story is that so other people can see other people talking about it and see that, for better or for worse, right? Like I'm living with this every day, and I'm learning how to live with this every day. And it's still hard every day, and I miss him every day, and I still wish he were here every day. But I'm learning how to carry him with me in spirit and still create a legacy for him, so to speak, and still have his life have meaning. And it takes a long time in your grief journey to accept and arrive at those things. And there are some aspects of being a lost mom that I hear people who are, 30 years out from their loss talking about, and I'm not there yet. I'm not accepting that, like, this is what was supposed to happen, and this is, better for whatever. No, I'm not there yet, but maybe I will get there, and maybe I won't. Like, it's okay to just feel what you feel and navigate this journey. And I think that, like you said, you didn't know about those support resources that are out there because there's no reason why you would, right? But knowing that this happens to people and being able to, then say, oh, if it happens to someone else in your circles, hopefully not, but it happens, you'll at least know there's someone out there you can ask. Right. And so that's also why it is so important to amplify people's stories and people's experiences, because it is going to continue to happen. The goal is to reduce and eliminate preventable deaths, but there are some deaths that aren't preventable. For example, if there are congenital defects that are fatal, the babies will die. I don't know if that's ever going to be solved. Accidents will continue to happen, and babies and infants will die. So support will always be needed. And if we can show people, if we can model that talking about your experience, talking about your baby is accepted culturally and supported, that's going to ultimately help everyone. Mm-hmm. And we didn't touch on it yet, but the loss experience is in itself awful. And navigating that is challenging, to say the least. But then when it comes to having subsequent pregnancies and subsequent children, that's a whole other world of challenges. Mm-hmm. And depending on how a person is supported in their loss journey will impact their subsequent pregnancies and parenting. And I firmly believe that the loss experience, especially of a baby, isn't something people can navigate alone, because we're not designed to have our children die. And at least now there is not enough knowledge and support out there for people to sort of know. Like, I think if our grandparents die, even if our parents die or adults die, like it's normal, right? It's talked about. There are resources out there. There are rituals that people follow to navigate that, but we don't have that well established for babies and infants. So being able to get connected to those support resources to help just have, whether it's a person or a group or a therapist, guide you through that experience is incredibly necessary. And no one should be left to try to navigate it on their own, because I think it's not possible. And then what people will do if we don't know how to navigate it, right? And then if they don't have someone kind of helping them through that, mm-hmm. they're going to suppress it, they're going to avoid it, and it will show up and affect your life. Mm-hmm. It may take years for it to be crisis level, and it may never be crisis level, but you'll always be living with some type of underlying struggle, and you might not even recognize or know where it came from. In fact, in one of my support groups, there was a woman who had experienced losses in her teens, 20s, and she is now in her 50s or 60s, and she had never talked with anyone about it. She had never processed it. Mm-hmm. And she herself said, I have these things that I do, and I never understood like why I do them, why I feel these things. And being in this group, learning and hearing the things you're talking about, I can directly connect them to my loss experiences and having not processed that for all these years.
And especially within our cultura, we tend to ignore feelings. We tend to ignore the fact that there is support out there, that we need to lean into our own family. And oftentimes our family can be toxic and not helpful as well. And there is another world out there. And so for anyone listening, there is another world out there, and the work that you're doing, Anna, is very important. And I really appreciate everything that you're doing, all of your efforts in just normalizing this and knowing that there is support, there is help out there. And even resources like your Diaper Drive, which during the months of September and October, you do a diaper drive. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. As I was explaining, the Diaper Drive program concept started as a way to honor Liam's birthday, and we've continued to have some type of Diaper Driver fundraiser every year since. And, coincidentally, conveniently, serendipitously, his birthday has typically always aligned with Diaper Need Awareness Week. So a national initiative to dedicate a week towards raising awareness about diaper need. And lots of diaper drives are held throughout the country. So we've continued that over the years, and it's multi layers to why we do that, right? It is to raise awareness about diaper need. And why are we raising awareness about diaper need? Well, because families who experience diaper need aren't focusing on the things that are really important. And then for us, by having those diapers, we're packaging them with that educational information. And hopefully by meeting that basic need, they have the capacity to learn a little bit more. And with more education, we're going to save more babies. Yeah. So it's a diaper may seem simple, but it's huge to the family who needs them. And it's huge if helping to meet basic needs can help a family focus on the important things in helping their babies thrive and hopefully saving babies. And then also to honor and celebrate Liam's birthday, because, you know, to this piece that we're talking about how important it is to talk about our experiences, share our stories, and raise awareness to baby loss, and normalize that it's okay to talk about them. You know, for us as a parents, we're just talking about our babies. The world labels it as dead babies, but we're just talking about our babies. And we're just like every other parent that we want to share about our babies and want to show pictures, and all those natural instincts are still there. And it's hard and hurtful, the responses that people give us when we want to talk about them. And so not every person needs to be as open and vocal as I am, but feeling okay. We get shut down so often that we end up just shutting down ourselves. And so we don't even process our experiences individually, and we push them away. We shy them away from having our own private bereaved parent journey. So it's all of that. And then it also beautifully leads into October, which is Pregnancy and Infancy Loss Awareness Month. And there's a week dedicated to that and a day dedicated to that, where there's an International Wave of Light on October 15th. But just the timing of that all worked out so wonderfully. And then also, you know, it just is an opportunity for us to help amplify what is Gifts from Liam and the work that we're doing, and, you know, get more people involved and aware of how to connect and get resources and support. There are many ways to participate and support the Diaper Drive, from becoming a partner in helping by either hosting an in-person drive, a virtual drive, a monetary collection. You can also then support us by donating, and you can donate either through the wish lists like you have done in the past, or by sending monetary donations, or even by becoming directly involved as a volunteer to help support the logistical aspects of the Diaper Drive. Yes. And of course, if none of those are within people's capacity, helping to share and just promote the Diaper Drive is always very helpful as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I will make sure to share the links in the show notes. That way people can donate, reach out. Hopefully, you know, they can participate in any capacity to the Diaper Drive, not just within that week, but beyond. And so I often ask Viva la Mami motherhood questions. And so, being that you are a mom of two, of Liam, and now you have a son, what is your meaning of motherhood?
Oh, man. I read a definition once that I loved. And I think it's, you know, being someone's mother is showing them that there's someone in the world who loves the shit out of them.
I've never heard that before.
So that is what I do for my 5-year-old, making sure that he knows every day that I love the shit out of him, and trying to raise some good humans. It's a big challenge, especially these days, to do that. And we see lots of bad happening out there. I don't think they're bad people, just people making bad decisions. Sometimes because they don't know better. But trying to help make sure that he's going to grow up and be able to make good decisions and help others. Yeah. And continue Liam's legacy. He does know about his brother and talk about his brother. Oh, so for him, it's normal.
Yeah, absolutely. As it should be. You're doing so wonderful about honoring Liam, and you are creating a legacy for him. I'm glad that you're very outspoken about this, because there need to be more voices, but definitely representation. And again, it shouldn't be just your responsibility, but you are setting a great example for others that may want to talk about their stories. I did interview another lost mom in the podcast as well, and she lost her baby. She was a couple months in her pregnancy, and she's also talking about her story out on social media, you know, and I love it, because all of this needs to be a reminder for everyone that even though it is a very, very shitty experience, a very unfortunate experience, having these conversations will create more of an opportunity for bereaved parents, and especially moms who have gone through this physically, emotionally, you know, that there is hope out there and it's not an isolating experience. So
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. Absolutely. And sometimes
Exactly.
it's just being able to hear someone else who went through something similar. I won't say the same because every experience is unique. And validating what you're feeling, validating what you're doing, what you want to do. If you want to buy the onesie that you saw in the store for your baby who isn't here, do that. That's fine. Put it
Mm-hmm.
on a stuffed animal and sleep with that stuffed animal at night.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all that is okay. And it's everyone's learning, the madrehood that you have with a baby who isn't here. We don't know how to be parents, period, right? We're all thrown into it and we're figuring it out. So you're figuring out your bereaved parenthood as well. And it evolves and changes just as our journeys evolve and change with our living babies.
Yes. Oh, I love that. What is one tip of advice you have for Latina mommies?
Be a part of the change. Like, there are,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we're becoming, as our generation of mommies becoming more aware of some of the not so great things about our cultura and our um, perhaps behaviors of our parents. And we can change that. We don't have to model those same behaviors, and becoming more aware, and not only for yourself and for your children, but for even on a societal level, on a cultural level, when it comes to bereavement
Mm-hmm.
or anything. Like, there's so
Mm-hmm.
many things that we can be helping to change. And as a mother, what we want is to, make it better for our children.
Yes. I love it. Yes. Well, Anna, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your bravery because this is not an easy topic for a lot of people. A lot of people may feel uncomfortable listening to this, but again, it's about creating awareness and how they can take action after this, whether if it's sharing this episode to another bereaved mom or someone that is pregnant. And again, it's normal to talk about this because it can happen to anyone. Not that I'm wishing upon and people to experience this, but it does happen. And so, yeah, I thank you so much for your presence here, but also for all that you do through your organization, Gifts from Liam. Where can people follow you if you can share that to our listeners?
They can follow us on all the social media channels. Our name everywhere is at Gifts from Liam, and that's our website as well, giftsfromliam.org.
Thank you so much, Anna, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and for amplifying our voices and our stories, especially for those of us who are often unheard.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to the Viva la Mami podcast. If you like this episode, make sure to leave a review and write what episode really resonated with you. If you really loved it, share it on social media or with an amiga. As always, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening. Make sure to follow me at Viva la Mami on Instagram or visit vivalamami.com. Please note the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be replaced by your healthcare provider nor taken as professional advice.